Okay, so the next question is, what are some systems and procedures you have used to support voice and choice? I think the biggest thing that I put in place was I knew immediately I needed to restructure how my classroom was organized, because I knew if what I was asking them to do didn't match how the class was set up and designed, it really wasn't going to make sense, and it just made sense for me to start there. I'm also a person who has to have everything in order before I can dive into something, whether it be my grading or something new. And so I felt like if I have students that are like that, it just makes sense to do that because it's more natural. Some other systems and procedures that I put into place was I took a full class period just talking to the kids about what voice and choice is and trying to help them kind of generate some ideas about what they believe that is. Welcome to Boot Camp Recruits was a task that I asked them to do. I used this as an example, but then I actually had them do it. And so I talked to them about, in a hypothetical question, or sorry, hypothetical classroom, for example, these are some types of things that learners might do to tackle a new task. And so one of the areas that I've noticed this year that my students are really continuing to struggle with, and it's a trend kind of across the board in 8th grade, is that we have some kind of wonky issues with grammar and mechanics, and also parts of speech and just understanding even simple sentence structure. Like, we're still struggling with that. And so I can complain about it a lot, but I knew I just needed to tackle it, but I also needed to tackle it in a way that allowed my students who are more at a mastery level with some of these skills, but also have some weird holes with it, to feel like their time wasn't being wasted, but then also to validate those students who really and honestly really are struggling and are kind of still at the very basic level with those language skills. And so what I decided to do was treat them like recruits and said, welcome to boot camp. And so I just kind of took on this whole aura of kind of being their sergeant, if you will. And so I told them that today they were going to begin the journey and kind of begin these first steps. And the first step really was kind of recognizing and thinking about, where is my confidence level, my comfort level with these skills that I'm expected to have mastered this year in 8th grade. And so then once they figured that out, it was up to them to decide, how do I want to tackle this as a learner? And so if they chose to fly solo because they were feeling confident, then they just took on the task of, how am I going to demonstrate my ability to master these skills, and where do I recognize my issues are? Is it with a particular part of speech, a couple parts of speech? Is it with identifying parts of sentences? Where are my biggest struggles? And so if they were flying solo, they were taking time to identify where the individual holes were, and then figuring out, how am I going to demonstrate mastery for my teacher? And the next piece was solo and buddy check. So essentially it worked just like fly solo, except they would fly solo for a while and then check in with someone they felt confident with, to give them feedback and then also seek clarification if they needed it. The next option they had was trio and practice, which was a sergeant check, and so they actually could work as a group of 3, which I knew would be a train wreck, but I wanted to design that on purpose because I knew so many of them would think that was the best thing ever. And that's the beauty of voice and choice and learning this process, is giving them those authentic opportunities to just look back and go, oh my gosh, why did I even do that? And then also give me an opportunity to regret giving that choice. But trio and practice and sergeant check was, they could work in 3 and then they could check with me. And what was really great was, within the first couple days, they would say, hey, is it okay if I work independently? And then, interestingly, by like day 3, some of them were like, hey, I think maybe I should work with you. I'm not at the same skill level that maybe I thought I was. And then this one is called Sergeant and Commander Lead. It's a paced march, and so just like boot camp where we're marching, it was a loud learning experience where the kids chose to sit with me around a rectangle table, and we just worked through identifying the pieces that we needed to, setting some goals together, and then we just learned out loud, kind of like a traditional approach, but it was a little bit more fun and very highly interactive and not as threatening because the group was still small. And then the other option was students could design their own path and checkpoint with the sergeant, so they just needed to say, hey, I would actually like to learn it this way. I think this would work really well for me, and then I'm going to check it in with the sergeant. Interestingly, not one of my 100 students actually chose this path. I thought that was interesting. I really thought a couple of them would tackle it. And so I kind of concluded that maybe part of the reason why they didn't do that was they knew that this was an area that was not a strength across the board. And so I think they were worried about, how do I even start that process? And so unfortunately, I would have liked to have had better results with this in the end, as far as where their mastery level was. I did not get what I wanted, and I really struggled with feeling like we had wasted a week of class time. When I looked at their assessments, they did not do well. And so that taught me a lot as a teacher, and it also taught my kids a lot. So when it came time to reflect on their assessments and their summatives, this was a great opportunity for them to say, you know what, I made a bad choice. This didn't work very well. I look at the feedback I got from my teacher. I look at how I feel about certain areas on the assessment, and I think I need to change things up a little bit differently next time. So I would say, as far as systems and procedures, the biggest things were organization, and then giving the kids an opportunity to actually experience it and fail with the choices they made. So those were the key pieces for me.
Okay.
So.